Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In this lesson, we'll be analyzing the 12th chapter of the first part of the novel Atonement. So, after what happened in the previous chapter, Emily now prepares to telephone PC Watkins, who is the village constable. She thinks more about Lola's injuries and feels little sympathy because Lola reminds her of her scene stealing sister Hermione. She wonders if she should hold off calling the constable, since Jack will call soon to apologize for his absence. She appears to suspect that his nights away from home indicate an extramarital affair, but both she and her husband are too unwilling to conflict to discuss the topic with one another. Emily thinks more on her husband's career and remembers catching a glimpse of some of his paperwork, which showed calculations predicting the casualties from the impending warfare. So every character's distinct and different perspective causes them to interpret the same events in different ways. Because Emily carries the baggage of her rocky relationship with her sister Hermione, she is unsympathetic to the harms Lola has suffered, even though Lola's injuries are genuine. Jack Tallis's effort to calculate the impact of war also mirrors other characters' attempt to encapsulate immense, unpredictable scenarios. His work also foreshadows the coming war. The themes happen to be perspective, class, and stories and literature. Then Emily stays seated inside and considers that her refusal to join in the searching seems like a part of her surviving from her 10-year-old self. She reflects on the dinner and notices that Robbie looked somewhat manic and wonders if perhaps he's smoking marijuana. Emily sees Robbie as a hobby of Jack's, cultivated to validate Jack's notion of equality. She was not in favor of funding Robbie's education and has often remarked that nothing good will come of it. So Emily recognizes her own childishness but does nothing to change her behavior. Meanwhile, like Bryony, she lets her class's biases against Robbie craft an image of him as a drug addled maniac. Okay, so she is just acting like Bryony. Just like Bryony had her own perspectives of looking at things. In the same way, Emily also has her biases against Robbie based on the difference of class. And that class's biases against Robbie, they help in crafting an image of him in Emily's mind as a drug addict or as a drug maniac. This view into her perspective also shows that Robbie's position in the household isn't as secure as he seems to believe. The themes again happen to be perspective and class because class is the basic reason behind the perspective of the people, behind the building up of the perspective of different people. Nevertheless, Emily thinks Bryony was out of line in her treatment of Robbie at the dinner. Paul Marshall eased the tension artfully, thinks Emily, and she wonders if he would make a good suitor for Cecilia. His chocolate business will make him enormously rich. After Emily ponders for another half hour, Jack calls. Emily tells him of Robbie's manic look at the table and asks if they really need to be funding medical school for him. Jack responds that they do. So, just as Emily is overly suspicious of Robbie, she resents him. Okay, just as Emily is overly suspicious of Robbie because she resents him, she is overly accommodating of Paul. So we can see the division, the distance, and difference of class. Because Paul belongs to a higher class, Emily has a different way of looking at him. Whereas, as compared to Robbie, she is completely suspicious towards him. And not at this very moment, since the very beginning, because it has been implied that she was the one who actually stopped her husband from funding Robbie's education. So, because she is suspicious of Robbie, because she resents him, she dislikes him, And in the same way, she is overly accommodating of Paul. Uh, oh, Even though he is aggressively greedy and ill-mannered, but she is accommodating of Paul simply because Paul is heir to a substantial fortune. Again, the themes are self-explanatory over here, which happen to be perspective and class. Suddenly, Leon, Cecilia, and Bryony enter, comforting a ghostly pale Lola. Leon reaches for the phone and tells his father to come home. He seems furious but tries to calm himself. He tells his mother that she should sit down, and Emily is terrified that Leon's news is so bad that he wants her to be seated before he delivers it. So, the tension of the dinner and of the characters' varied and repeated misconceptions has finally come to ahead to its top, and life will never return to the way it was previously after this moment. Leon, surprisingly, has adopted an unusual role of authority to handle this crisis. The themes happen to be perspective, guilt, loss, innocence, and unchangeable past. With this, we end this lesson. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. Jazakallah.